You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast.
Hello, I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
A special thanks to PodPoluli for letting us use their studio today during the first annual Hudson Podathon. Today's episode is presented to support and benefit the Hudson Special Olympics, which provides sports training and athletic competition for children and adults with intellectual disabilities. An accredited affiliate of the Special Olympics Ohio, the chapter began over 20 years ago with 6 athletes and has grown to support over 75 athletes in a half a dozen different sports. So take a moment to go to hudsonspecialolympics.org, click on the donations page, and do whatever you can to help support these talented and courageous local athletes.
And we'd also like to thank our listeners, Neil, Helen, and David, who specifically asked if we could do a few interviews with people who work in the book publishing business, such as agents, bookstore owners, and independent publishers.
This episode continues our mini-series Inside the Book Industry. Today, our guest is Kate Schlademan, owner of the Learned Owl Bookstore in Hudson. Welcome, Kate. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Kate, what do you love the most about being an independent bookstore owner?
Being surrounded by books every day.
That sounds beautiful.
It's a dream.
Yeah.
Sounds like Leah's dream for sure.
Yeah. That sounds absolutely wonderful. So what about meeting the people, like the people being part of the community?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The bookshop has been there over 50 years now, and we've just been able to build such a good reputation and such a good community outreach that it's really fun. We've really become a center of the community where people come for more than just books, but camaraderie and friendship. It's wonderful. We're very thankful.
Yes, it certainly, the Learned Owl is very indented into the Hudson lifestyle. Everyone knows they love it. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's
And
wonderful.
We're thrilled it's here.
So thank you for taking it over from Liz Murphy and making sure that it would keep going on. So,
It's been a dream come true for me.
well, great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So our friend Rob Thomas posted a question on our podcast page on Facebook, and he asked, how do authors get their books into the shelves of independent bookstores?
Well, that's a great question. And first off, let me tell you, everyone is different. Every independent bookstore has different rules and regulations, policies for what they take in and what they promote. So really, you just want to check with them. First, start with their website. A lot of them will have information on the website about what local authors should do. A lot of times you're going to email information to them. Generally, stopping in can be a little bit difficult because in the independent bookstore business, we wear a lot of hats. So we're always doing a lot of things. Best to kind of set up a time to come in and talk with people if that's the way you'd like to go about it. But emailing information about yourself, your book, is always a good way to start.
How do you determine where the books actually go inside the store?
It really depends on what the subject matter is. So a lot of times we try to just shelve them generally, but we also have a local author, local interest section. So really it comes down to content.
And do you meet with the local authors?
A lot of times, yes. Yeah.
Right. Do they set up meetings with you? Do they come into the bookstore and actually get to look around, or how does it work?
Yes, absolutely. And it always helps if people actually know our bookstore and kind of what our market is. That's a big thing as well. Cold calling at bookstores, it's okay, but just knowing a little bit about them and what they do, having been in before, is always a huge bonus.
So do a little research before you go
Absolutely.
knocking on the door.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So let's say you get an email from an author and you say, hey, come on in, let's talk. So that you talk, and then you might buy 5 or 10 books from them, or is it a consignment? How does that work?
We generally work on consignment terms. It's just a little bit easier for us, and you just never know how a book is going to do. So for a trial run, consignment is best. Our general consignment terms are 60-40, where the author retains 60% of whatever they want to charge as the retail price. We allow them to set that. We also do a lot of local author events. Our store's pretty small, so we tend to stick with hyper-local, whereas the library in town will do a lot of more of the bigger author events. So we're a vehicle for that, where they don't do those. We kind of manage both of those markets. So we're kind of like the smaller, they're the larger. So it's great because we can give a lot more people the opportunity. We just had a local author yesterday outside. She sold 12 books. It was great. A lot of people got to see her and meet her, and so we had a really good time with it.
Well, that was one of our next questions. So Carolyn Drone we saw. And then, but how do you choose the authors for the in-store events?
Well, see, and this is a little while since I've actually been the events coordinator. That's how I started at the store.
Oh, okay.
And now I have an events coordinator that helps me with it. So really it comes down to scheduling, what we have available versus author schedules, that kind of thing. We try to give as many people an opportunity as possible. So that's, if you can do it, we'll try to fit you in.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Wow.
Great. And then how's it working with being out because of COVID outside on the sidewalk?
Honestly, I think it helps to some extent. There's just a lot more exposure for people walking by. People, just when they're walking by, aren't necessarily going to swing in the bookstore unless they have something to pick up. So if you have someone out there on the sidewalk engaging, it really kind of helps promote the event a lot more.
Yeah, I would think for both you and the author.
Absolutely.
Because maybe they're walking by, not really even seeing that there's a bookstore, but now they're like, oh, look, hey, there's a local independent bookstore.
Yep,
Okay.
absolutely.
So that's wonderful.
Right, you stop at the red light, you look over, and there's somebody sitting at a table. You think, well, I should go see what they're doing.
Yeah, what are they doing? Yeah.
So do you have any tips for authors who are doing book signings?
Again, do your research, know your market. That's probably the biggest part of it, and try to be outgoing. I know a lot of authors, they're very reclusive just by nature because they spend so much time alone writing, that kind of thing. But it's really just best to try to engage as much as possible. So if you're at a table at an author signing, try to say hello.
Yeah.
This is my book. That's the thing. And I know that can be such a difficult thing sometimes, but that really goes a long way.
Well, that is what we have learned. By speaking to a lot of authors, the hardest part is trying to market themselves or saying, okay, so they wrote it, but then how do they oh, no, I don't feel comfortable telling people about it. No, you have to tell people about it because that's what people are going to love your book,
Right.
you know?
Yep, absolutely.
So,
you have to be your own biggest fan and cheerleader for sure.
And that is hard.
It's like an imposter syndrome. Like, I'm not good enough. I wrote the book, but I'm still not good enough to sell it. So
Yeah,
you just have to
exactly.
break out and do it. Yeah.
But I think we all fall into that trap no matter what we're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
So what is your biggest challenge working with authors?
I think managing expectations is a really difficult thing. That's probably it in a nutshell. People always are like, oh, I published this book and I'm going to sell 500,000 copies. And, it's just, that's a great goal to set eventually, but there's stepping stones along the way. Also trying to make sure that people don't get discouraged in the process. Because just because you're not selling those 500,000 books doesn't mean you haven't sold some books, and they have probably affected some people in some way that you wouldn't even imagine. So you're going to have fans along the way, and they're going to be some of your biggest, best fans, even if you only sold 50 books this time or 100 books this time. So just keep doing it, manage your expectations, and really try to get out there.
I think you made a really good point about books can hit people in a way that the authors can't imagine. If you want to be rich and famous, okay. But if you want to reach people, that is the way. We had spoken to an author in January with a book that for whatever reason spoke to me, and I was just like running around. Everyone has to read this book. And yes, he might, I don't know how many books he'll sell, but maybe it's worth it. And he did say as an author, it was worth it just to hear my excitement. Because when you are creating a book, you don't know what people are going to think.
Oh, absolutely. And I like to think that people that publish independently, it's a story that they really want to tell and they really want to get out there. And every single person that it reaches and makes a difference for, that's really the big picture right there.
I just love hearing you say that. I mean, you can tell you're really love books and that you want to connect with people or make it, it's just something about that statement, like, all right, you're a great person, you know what I mean?
Oh, thank you. Well, absolutely. I mean, books make all the difference in the world. So.
Yeah, and book lovers know that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And other people, wow, they don't understand that.
And authors know it too.
And authors, of course, know that, yes.
Yep.
So you mentioned independent book publishers. Are there different rules for somebody who self-published a book and somebody who has a book publisher when it comes to putting the book in your store?
Not necessarily. It's really just more comes down to where we get the book from. So if you're independently published, we're more likely going to have it on consignment from you. If it's traditionally published, we can most likely get it more easily from the publisher directly. That's really all it comes down to.
But it's still the author coming in or talking to you.
Yeah,
and
a lot of times.
pushing themselves.
Yep, absolutely. I had an author call me about a week or so ago. He was just doing a blurb. He was published through HarperCollins. He's from the area, doing a blurb for Independent Bookstore Day, talking about our store. Just out of nowhere, he was doing this. And he's like, and by the way, my book came out last year, but I'm going to be back in town. Can we do an event sometime? So sure, why not? I mean, there's all different ways to get to books and authors together in the store and selling books to people.
Mm-hmm. So what about the craziest pitch you've ever heard from an author?
Oh my goodness, that's a hard one. One of my favorites, this really nice man, but he had the main character of his book was an angry robot, and he wanted to film this book kind of...
a trailer?
Yes, thank you. That's the word. And he wanted to do it in the store, and it just became this kind of really big, crazy production. And it was obviously fairly low budget, but, that's okay too. But that one was pretty interesting.
And he chose your store.
Well, of course.
That's nice.
Neat.
So Marna Smith asked us on Facebook, once the book is in the store, what do store owners do to help promote the sale of the book?
Well, right at the front of the store, we have a local author featured shelf where we put any new books that we've brought in, and they live there at least a week, 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. And that's where a lot of our first sales come from. Then they move to their respective sections. Sometimes they'll end up on displays. Anytime we do author events, we will promote through press releases, social media, on our website. But really it comes down to the author themselves kind of helping, sharing, promoting, letting people know that the books are available at our store. That really will bring people in as well.
Good.
So putting it on their own Facebook page saying, if you want to buy my book.
Yep. It's all about the cross-marketing.
Right.
Great. Yeah. Besides Amazon, what is the biggest challenge that you have right now?
Well, Amazon, COVID, obviously.
Yeah.
But,
But it seems like you've done a good job through COVID.
We've been very fortunate. Again, it comes back to community support. Our community, we've been here a long time. They want us to stay. They made sure that they really reached out all through the last year and still continue to. So we've been fortunate with that. Biggest challenge? I don't even know right now. I'm in a good place. It's been I've had the store for 8 years now, and knock on wood, I feel like I'm in a good place.
That is absolutely wonderful.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great. So I think you have done a good job because you have continued to have authors come and promote their books. And I see that you will deliver books in 3 towns, not just the Hudson, but you go to 3 different towns. So I think that's an excellent
marketing
aspect
absolutely.
Also.
Yeah, a lot of people have taken advantage of that over the last year. And we've always kind of delivered in Hudson. There's a lot of retirement communities that we've always delivered to. And then once we really shut down, I realized that was something that needed to be extended. So, we go up to Twinsburg, down to Stowe. It's been good.
That's great.
Yeah.
I remember when the pandemic first started, I saw on the local news that you were dropping books off. You could order them online and pull up and somebody'd run out and hand them to you. I thought that was pretty cool because that was kind of before every restaurant and everyone started doing it. It seemed like
Kate was the forefront of that. Okay. Everyone took your lead. Good job.
Nationwide.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like independent bookstores all across the country, we've always had to pivot and do things differently and figure out new ways to do things all along. So we, in some ways, were poised for something like this because we can shift our business models so easily. Well, I shouldn't say easily, but quickly and drastically. And that's been very helpful in being able to get through this and a lot of other challenges, too.
And it also seems like people are focusing now on independent bookstores. Because of COVID, more people are supporting independent bookstores. And I don't know if that would have been happening without COVID.
It's very true. In some ways, that's very true. Sometimes it takes the most extreme thing to bring us all back to what is most important in our lives. So a lot of some of the best things in my life have come out of the worst year. You have to be grateful for what has come out of it.
So if you were to purchase your bookstore again today, what would be the first thing that you would do?
I would probably, I don't know that I would really do anything that differently. I worked there for 2 years before I purchased it, and Liz Murphy, the previous owner, was amazing about helping me to understand what went into actually running the bookstore every day, because that's it. You get bogged down in the day-to-day details. So I was very fortunate in that respect. A lot of people go into it not really understanding or knowing like the commitment and the energy that it takes. So I don't know that I'd really do anything differently.
That's great.
So what is the one thing that people don't understand or don't realize about independent bookstores?
I think the biggest thing is we are one of the only industries that don't pick the price for our products. The publishers set the price. It's printed on the books. We don't really have a whole lot of wiggle room. And our profit margin is extremely thin. We make very little on each book that we sell. So every day it can be a struggle to keep your doors open and your staff paid. Those are probably the biggest things.
Well, thank you for sharing with that, because that is a good thing, especially for authors to know, because maybe authors walk in and think, well, you can give me a deep discount, right? You can give me more money back. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you.
If an author is working on their book, do you recommend that they put a price on the book?
That's a good question. And this is something we struggle with in publishing in general. Net pricing or let the publisher set it. It's whatever they're comfortable with. I honestly don't have a recommendation at this point. I'm still on the fence in that whole area.
Okay.
I have a lot more to learn is really what it comes down to.
Do you have any advice for authors?
I guess, especially if you're independently publishing, think about how your book is going to be on the shelf, and always remember that it's not always going to be face out. Like a spine is a really important thing that you don't necessarily think about when you're having your book made or when you're going through that process. So that and editing. So fantastic.
Right.
Yeah.
We've heard that from lots of our guests about, you read it, you have all your friends read it, you hire an editor, and then there's still a typo in it or a word misspelled.
Absolutely.
And you think, how could that happen? It's been read 100 times before it was published, and then it still is a typo.
Tell us about, have you had someone walk in for the first time and see their book in your store? That must be fun.
It is really fun, especially now that we've got the featured local author shelves. It's great because there was somebody just a couple of weeks ago that came in and they were like taking pictures and so excited. They were like, I never imagined I would see my book on a bookshelf. So yeah, that's really, really heartwarming.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great.
So what a fun process, their book. I mean, every day has to be a fun day.
Oh, it is.
That's
Absolutely.
great.
Exhausting, but I wouldn't change it for the world.
With a big publishing firm, do sometimes they send too many books, or how's that work if you need to, let's say, change your shelves?
Oh, sure. Again, we're one of the few industries where we can choose to make all of our products returnable. So that's
great.
how we set up terms with publishers and that, which is great because then we have the ability to change our shelves over fairly, well, not quickly, but every 6 to 12 months, we can change over what we have on the shelves to keep it new and relevant.
Well, you
Great.
must know the UPS and FedEx drivers by name, huh?
Oh, yes. Josh is one of the best.
Well, Kate, thanks for joining us today on the Author Inside You podcast. It's been great having you as a guest.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
And I think a lot of the authors will really enjoy listening to you and hearing how they can network and get into the local bookstores.
All right. Thank you.
So please don't forget to go to the HudsonSpecialOlympics.org and offer whatever support you can. Your donations are greatly needed and much appreciated. And until next time,
Right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.